Welcome to the culture track. And if you guys were here for the first one, first of all, raise of hands, how many were in Vaughn's session on vision? Okay, so a couple people. There's going to be a little bit of overlap, and it's interesting because we are talking about culture. Bruce talked about culture. Culture seems to be, at least in this track, seems to be kind of the word of the day. And I'm in agreement with Vaughn. It's one of the most important things in your business. And if you read my description, something that I said when I was thinking about culture, and Vaughn called it soft, I described it. Has anybody here driven a pontoon boat? Okay, the first time you drive a pontoon boat, you try to bring it into dock and park, and there's other boats around. It's crazy. It's swinging. You go this way, and it kind of drifts this way. And sometimes steering culture can feel a little bit like steering a boat for the first time. It kind of swings, and you're like, whoa, that way it went too far one direction or the other. So that's how I describe culture, and digging into it was really interesting. I learned some things, learned quite a lot. So I'm going to jump in. I'm Karl from Castle Bear. We're a marketing and design agency. We're located up in Canton. I'm pleased to have with me today Keegan. He's my 13-year-old, and he decided to run shotgun with me today. So thanks for having Keegan. Thanks, Keegan, for coming. So just a little bit about me. I spend a lot of time behind the computer doing digital things and working kind of in the technical space a little bit. And I love to get out hiking, love the outdoors. And last weekend, Keegan and I got a chance to go down to the Shenandoah Valley National Park and do some hiking on the Appalachian Trail. So that's a little bit about me. Love to get outdoors, love birds in particular, and just backpacking and hiking. Jumping right into building culture. So my son is a Latin scholar. He studied Latin for about 4 years. It's been interesting to see his progression. The word culture comes from cultus, and cultus in Latin means care. And I think that sums up culture maybe more than anything else. Culture is really about how you care. So what we're going to talk today about is how you care. Vaughn gave this one away, so if you weren't in the first session, I'm looking to you to answer this. If you go to Google and you type in culture E, what do you think the autocomplete is that Google gives you, one of the first autocompletes? Anybody who wasn't in Vaughn's session. And we're playing for candy bars, so this is real. Any takers? Google's got you guys beat. So, okay, somebody who was in Vaughn's session. You got it. Culture eats strategy for breakfast is one of the first autocomplete terms that will come up. So, like I said, peanut butter and jelly chocolate candy bar. There you go. So in addition to that, I also found the statement, culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They take it up just a little bit. I also found the statement, culture eats everything. And I think that's true as well. So who does culture, forming culture, talking about culture, who does it apply to? You might be a business of one person, you might be a sole proprietor, and you think, well, I don't really need to worry about that stuff. Culture applies to you whether you have a business of one, a business of 10 people, a staff of 10,000 people, a staff of 100,000 people. Culture applies to businesses at all scales. So I want to jump in and Vaughn defined culture. I think he had some good terms. This is a little bit more of a heady definition than I like, but it's true. Your company culture is the beliefs and behaviors that determine how those employed by a company at all levels interact internally and handle outside business. So that's what we're talking about. When I studied culture, I found statements like it's the backbone of your company, it's your company's soul, it's a unifying force, it's the heart of a company, and I think more importantly, it's the how of everything that you do. So we're kind of establishing what culture is and why it's important. Why are we talking about it today? Why are we spending time on a beautiful Friday, spending time talking about this? Why should you really, really care about culture? Forbes wrote an article a couple years ago that I think really nails it. Give it enough time and money, your competitors can duplicate almost everything you've got working for you. They can hire away some of your best people. That's scary. They can reverse engineer your processes. Sometimes that happens. The only thing that they can't duplicate is culture. Culture is the only truly sustainable competitive advantage that you have in the long term. So again, the statement, anyone can copy your strategy, but nobody can copy your culture. So doing a quick check-in of where we're at, we talked about culture means care. You have a culture no matter if you have 1 or 100,000 people. It's your one truly sustainable competitive advantage. So I find in business, and you guys may find this as well, today we're talking about vision. You're getting a lot of information. Started off with bootstrapping, talking about your vision, your mission. And as business owners, I think sometimes it can feel like a ticker tape running through your head of all the things that you need to be keeping track of. You're trying to take care of HR, you're trying to take care of finance, you're trying to take care of marketing, you may have a facility that you're in charge of or you need to put somebody in charge of. You have the economy, you have industries, you have the competition. And yet we're talking about, hey, culture is important. So where do I plug this in to everything else that I need to be looking at? And for me, it gets overwhelming when you're kind of trying to navigate all of those different things. So this diagram really helped me understand where culture fits in. And at the top, we have your vision, your mission, and your values. Next down from that, you have strategy and you have culture. So strategy is starting to talk, going down, okay, what is our business strategy? What are we producing? What does our service look like? Culture is starting to get into how you're shaping the behaviors and things in your company. Down from that, you have goals, and culture is going to drive practices. Then you have activities and behaviors. And out of that, activities, behaviors, that comes together to form the results that you get in your business, the outcomes that you have. So back to where does culture fit in? I like to talk about, at the top, you have your vision, your mission, and your values. And how many here have heard of Simon Sinek? Start with why. A lot of people, that was very popular a couple years ago, start with why. Your purpose statement, your why is at the top. On the left, you have your strategy. That's kind of the what. And your culture is the how. So it's kind of your why, your what, and your how. Culture talks about how we do what we do. So let's jump into trivia and have a little bit of fun. There's more candy bars. What is the fast food chain that's best known for their culture of customer service? Chick-fil-A. I heard this guy right here first. Candy bar. Chick-fil-A. Now this one, this one could be up for debate. I have one answer. I get to pick the answer. The international hotel chain renowned for their culture of customer service. Sam. Well, so there. I'll skip through the logo. The economy airline best known for their company culture. Say, I heard Mr. Colblin's in the back. Me picking who I heard first is also arbitrary, sorry. You like who I picked? Okay. Yeah, Southwest. The online retailer known for their exceptional company culture, so much so that they charge $6,000 for a 3-day class that they call Culture Camp. You guys have been fast on the other ones, so. Zappos, boom. Nice job. And man, what a deal you guys are getting today. I don't think anybody paid six grand to be here. Nice job. Yeah, Zappos. So the first, jumping into practical tacticals, how do we build culture? And I have 4 points that I'm talking about today. The first one is purpose and values. And honestly, I'm going to blaze through this one really fast because Vaughn talked about vision, and vision is about establishing your purpose. Sam is going to be sharing about values, and I'm excited to hear what he has to share. So we're going to keep going pretty quickly. Defining your purpose, it's your mission, it's your brand promise. It talks about why we exist. You need to define your values. That was kind of the why part at the top. And I'm going to jump into going back to our 4 companies that we're talking about. I found it really interesting. Southwest, their purpose statement is to connect people to what's important in their lives through friendly, reliable, and low-cost air travel. The Ritz-Carlton is a place where the genuine care and comfort of our guests is our highest mission. We are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Chick-fil-A, to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us, to have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. Zappos, provide the best customer service possible, deliver wow through service. Moving on to the second practical tactical. I like saying that phrase. Thank you to Kevin West. Enroll people who fit. And again, Vaughn hit on this one a little bit. Enrolling people who fit in your organization and fit your culture is ultimately important. You can't ignore it. It seems obvious, but it's critical. If you don't pay attention to this, you'll find out that you can't ignore it. As business owners, you probably weren't trained in HR. How many people here have been trained in HR formally? Josh Branch in the back. Anybody else? So and I wanted to go back and ask, how many people either own your business or you manage people in your business? Can I see a raise of hands? Okay, so multiple people here are in charge of managing people. And typically, you're not going to be trained in HR, but we jump into it and we start hiring people. And if you were trained in HR, being trained in hiring for culture probably didn't happen. So as business owners, play this scenario, or as business managers, the scenario, you have a spot to fill, you have orders coming in, orders piling up, customer demands, you're a problem solver, right? That's why we're kind of in the position we're in. We can solve problems. We'll hire somebody and we'll figure it out. How many of us have been in that spot? You plug somebody in, and 6 months later, you realize that was a big mistake. Who you hire directly impacts your culture. Hire people who personally identify with your purpose and values. And that statement to me feels a little bit like, well, I'm maybe being a little egocentric. I need people who personally identify with my purpose and values. But if you don't, and they have their own agenda, that agenda will start coming out. The more comfortable they get in your organization, their agenda starts to show up and bring sideways energy. Hiring people on culture often takes time. And as business owners and problem solvers, sometimes we don't like to spend a lot of time on decisions like that, but it takes time commitment. Bruce was talking about going through all the hiring process, all the interviews he's done. I'm assuming Bruce knows a lot about the time that it can take to find the right fit for a job. You need an intentional interview process. And when I'm talking about practical tacticals, each of these subjects you could take a deep dive into how do you have an interview process. We're not going to get into all of those levels, but it's an important one to learn about. The other thing that's very important is the order of priority when you're hiring people. You want to hire on culture first and competency second. It's easy to look for when you have a job opening, maybe you have a technical position, it's really easy to look for and be wowed by a superstar. And you make a sacrifice on culture. You find somebody who's been in the industry for 10 years or 15 years, they know that skill, they're going to do great, and it's easy to hire on competency first and hope that they're going to fit into your culture. The danger that you run into is you end up hiring what I call a lone ranger, who can't really work with anyone, but they're excellent at what they do. And so because they're so good at what they do, you're like, man, we can't make it without them. We're just gonna kind of overlook some of the other things that come with the package, and they're too valuable to us to lose them. And so we make concessions on one side because of the competency, because we hired on competency first. The person may not always follow the rules, and so like Bruce was talking about, what you allow, I forget how he said it, but what you allow then suddenly starts to become the norm, and everybody else is looking at, well, John gets away with that, so why can't I do that? So hiring on culture first, competency second. Going back to the 4 businesses that I picked to kind of use as examples, something very fascinating about Zappos. How many people here think it's easy to get into Harvard? Yeah, no raise of hands. Harder to get into Zappos as an employee than Harvard. So it's not an easy company to get into. They interview based on a cultural fit. They use all behavior-based questions. If you're interviewing for them, you're going to meet with multiple employees and multiple points of evaluation. The process, now they're an online retailer. We think online retail sales, it's like put it in my shopping cart, check out, move on. Then like online retail is just like, it's production. So think like that's the world they live in, and yet they're taking months to hire an employee. Now they bring an employee in, they put the person in the call center. 30 days later, I've hired Tanya. I come to Tanya, I say, Tanya, it's been 30 days. I've got $3,000. You can take it and leave the company today, or you can decide to stay. So every employee that comes in, they offer them $3,000 at the end of month 1 to walk out the door, because they're so dedicated they want people in the company who are committed to staying in the committed to being part of the culture, that they incentivize people to walk out the door. They'd rather they take the $3,000 and leave. Now you're never going to get hired in again, but they'd rather you take the money and leave because they're so committed to their culture. Third, practical, tactical, investing in communication. A couple ways to do that. So investing in communication, one of the points I picked, understanding yourself and understanding others. And there's a couple tools that I'd suggest. The DISC. How many people here have done a DISC test? Lots of hands going up. Myers-Briggs is another one that's good. The Enneagram, they all kind of come at things from different angles. Extremely important to gain that understanding. And it helps you to build empathy. When you understand yourself, you understand how you interact in groups and how you interact on a daily basis. And you understand how your teammates interact and kind of what angle they're coming from. And suddenly the conversations that are strained and stressed, you have an understanding of why they're strained and stressed and how each one's coming at it. So extremely important to have that type of communication tool, behavior tool to understand your team. Helps to develop interpersonal communication. I think the other thing that I want to say before I move on to the other point, so I saw a lot of hands go up for taking the DISC test. How many people have done 4 training sessions on what the DISC actually means and how it applies to you? Can I see a raise of hands? So I've got a couple, but I literally just saw like 3 or 4 hands. So a lot of us, and I found this in our own organization, we had done the DISC with everybody, but that's where it stopped. They had one session with a coach that explained it to them, and we're like, hey, we're good, peace out. And you move on down the road, and suddenly a year later, we have discs on our server, but that didn't really change anything. And so we had to go back and say, whoa, time out. We actually need to invest not just the $100 we paid for the disc profile and the coaching session. We need to get around the table and start talking about how this actually shows up in our organization on a day-to-day basis. We're in a creative industry. It's design and marketing and all that, it's somewhat arbitrary. So personalities can come out, and we had to unpack kind of what are those dynamics that are happening in the room. And that, when we did the disc, we stepped back and started pulling everybody around the table and had our coach come in and start talking about all the different dynamics. We put a chart up on the wall, we put everybody's spot and started talking about how those interactions are happening, and it enlightened our conversations tremendously. So investing in communication is more than just taking the personality test, but actually having somebody come in and help you unpack what that really means on a day-to-day basis when you're in the heat of a conference or a meeting and you're trying to unpack something, understanding what's going on. So training in company, the other one that I want to talk about, training in company purpose, values, and behaviors. And I'm going to just jump straight into Ritz-Carlton. When they hire somebody in, as business owners again, or if you're a manager, you're thinking, I've got a spot to fill, we have production that's needed, I'm now paying this person, they're on the clock, they come in day one, let's jump in and start teaching them, here's how we make our widgets, or here's how we provide our service. Ritz-Carlton starts with their vision, mission, and their values first. So somebody comes in the first couple days, they're going to spend learning the company's value, their purpose, the values. They start off with that, and then they move on to teaching the functions of the job. Something else that Ritz-Carlton does that I think is a really good point, they have 24 points documented for their company. Again, their vision, their mission, their values, some behavior traits. They have 24 points documented. Every day at shift change, they do their kind of stand-up meeting with everybody coming in for the new shift. They take 1 point and they teach that 1 point at the beginning of shift change. Every day, 24/7, 365. So they're going through their 24 points, and Vonda talked about how he starts his meetings, talking about the vision, the values, reminding the staff, and I found it really interesting, Ritz-Carlton makes that a part of their daily routine, that they are constantly teaching and rehashing, kind of, reiterating what their purpose is. So focusing on communication. The last practical tactical we're going to talk about is our behaviors. Purpose, values, and culture drive your behaviors. Culture impacts your behaviors, and behaviors impact your culture. I really see it as cyclical. If you have good behaviors, you're going to build your company culture. If you have a good, strong culture, you're going to develop good behaviors. And so they kind of feed on each other. Going back to our diagram, we had purpose and values, we have culture, practices, and behaviors, but I drew the loop there because I really see those two as being pretty connected. So we want to define behaviors that reflect your purpose and your values. Write them down. I loved what Vaughn pulled out, that sheet that had, the little cheat sheet that had the 25 different behaviors. Write them down, post them on the wall, wherever they need to be. You're talking about your essential behaviors of being a part of your team. Build your behaviors into your processes. Going to Chick-fil-A, talking about how they implement and build behaviors into their processes. They have what they call their core four. And so these are the 4 behaviors that you're going to experience when you walk in the door if you order at Chick-fil-A. They're going to create eye contact. They're going to share a smile. They'll speak enthusiastically, and they're going to stay connected with you through the transaction. So in addition to that, if you've studied Chick-fil-A, they have what they call their second mile service behaviors. Comes off the principle of if you're asked to go 1 mile, go with that person 2 miles. And so they call it their second mile service behaviors. Delivering meals to high needs guests, performing table touch-ins. So if you've eaten at Chick-fil-A, they'll go out and they'll kind of check in with people periodically. It's pretty much on a scheduled basis. They're going to be walking through the dining room. And when I say dining room, fast food restaurant, remember that. And then carrying large orders. If you have multiple kids like we do, and my wife goes in there with a couple kids, they're going to help carry your order for you. The last part of focusing on behaviors I want to talk about is storytelling. And storytelling is sharing examples of behaviors that reflect your purpose and values. So stories are memorable, stories give context, and Jesus taught with parables. So I don't know that we need another reason why we would want to teach with stories, because the greatest teacher ever did that. And so jumping into Southwest, in 2013, Southwest kind of redid their vision, their mission. They kind of just looked at everything and tweaked it, made some changes to it. And one of the things that the CEO said is, when you do this and you have your vision statement, your mission statement, your values, and they go up on the wall, and they're nice and shiny and pretty for about a week, but they suddenly kind of, hey, orders coming in, production, and you kind of forget that stuff. And the way to keep that fresh in your customers' minds is by telling stories. And so when they redid all of this stuff in 2013, one of the things they implemented was that they wanted to put stories in place so that they're telling the stories of what good customer service looks like. And so one of the things that they do is the CEO on a weekly basis does a shout out. So he'll look for 58,000 employees, okay? So they have a lot of stories happening, and they'll find some of those standout stories, and the CEO will give a weekly shout out to specific employees of Southwest and say, hey, this employee did this, and here's it's an example of what our customer service looks like. And then out of that, they pick one feature story that they put in Spirit magazine, which is the magazine that Southwest publishes that goes out to all of their staff. And so they're using stories to continue to reinforce their company culture. So in summary, just going back, so here's where, as a design firm, we decided to get a little creative, and I'm going to go back through just hitting the key points that we talked about today. So culture equals care. It's your one truly sustainable competitive advantage. You want to define your purpose, your why do we exist, define your values. The second point was enrolling people who fit, hiring on culture first and making sure you're checking that box before we move on to competency. Investing in communications, whether you're using DISC or Myers-Briggs or Enneagram, and Ritz-Carlton is, and then training on that purpose. Ritz-Carlton being a great example of how that ongoing training can look. Focusing on behaviors, defining behaviors, your purpose and values shape your behaviors, and your behaviors practice kind of reinforce your culture, and then using storytelling. And all of that put together forms this infographic. We put this together as a way, you get PowerPoint slides, and I always kind of glaze over, and I want them because I want to remember this stuff and go back to the deck, and you take notes, but I love having something like this that kind of reminds me of everything. So we put together this infographic that has kind of where culture fits in the center. We have our 4 different practical tacticals and a couple of the key statements that we talked about. So I have these that I will be sending out to people. This is just hot off the press. The ink is just dried. But if you want to drop your business card up here on the desk, or if you don't have a business card, I have a tablet up here. Put your address and your email, and we're still deciding. We're either going to send out hard copies or e-blast with this in it, or maybe both. But if you'd like a copy of this, please sign up for it, and we'll get that out to you. So thanks so much for coming today. I enjoyed sharing this, enjoyed learning a lot about culture, and I hope that you guys can take something from this and impact your organizations. So, any questions that anybody wants to? And you're dismissed to go. Any questions anybody has? I don't know if I could answer them, but maybe somebody in the room can. So we'll field any questions if there is anything.
I'd be interested in the questions during the interviewing process, behavior questions.
Yeah.
What would those look like?
I think right. Bruce, I'm not an expert in interviewing, so when we do interviews, we're bringing more staff in that actually, I do a lot of listening. I don't know if Bruce, if that's something that you can jump in and speak to.
I have a one sheet of character questions to ask.
Okay.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
glad to get that to whoever.
It's a great question. Again, that's like a whole nother level that I don't have that for you, but yeah, that'd be great, Bruce.